Cool. Recording in progress.
Recording in progress, but you know what's not recording?
Our
The other part.
microphones.
Our microphones.
Yeah, let's do that.
Let's sync us up, okay?
All right.
All right. You ready?
Yeah.
Okay. 3, 2, 1, click.
I did click
Oh,
it.
you did click it. Were you behind? Were you slightly late? Delayed?
I think I'm slightly delayed on your end. I
Oh,
clicked it when
okay.
you said click. Yeah,
Well,
I'm definitely
then
like 3 seconds behind on your end.
there's a little bit of a delay here. We'll deal with it. We'll cope. We are professionals here.
Totally.
Yes. Wow, there's a delay.
Yeah, there is.
Oh boy, doesn't matter. You know who else
Is
was
somebody
delayed?
downloading something on your internet?
Let me see. Let me check. Is there anything I can slow down here? Why don't you guys stop? And why don't you guys stop? I got all
Your
kinds
bars are
of.
red on Zoom.
I've got all kinds of processes running. What bars are red? I don't know what that means.
You have little internet like connectivity bars by your name, and they keep
I
going
do?
between yellow and red. Yeah,
You don't have that.
it's because my
I don't
internet's
see that.
fine.
Well, why can't I see it on mine? It's just, how are they looking now? How are my bars now?
They're looking okay right now.
Okay.
But there's definitely still a delay.
Well, dang it. Okay, well, whatever. We're going to talk about
Whatever.
the ultimate delay. A ghost that might not... There's a story that might not have any ghosts in it at all.
Which is strange because this is the section of the book all about ghosts and being real.
Well, no, it's because it's all about the weird. It's all about really not understanding what's going on. Fabulous.
This story...
Hey, everybody, I'm Phil.
And I'm Willow.
And it's Del Toro time.
It's Del Toro time. It's Del Toro
Holy
time.
crap. I finished saying Del Toro time before you even started saying Del Toro time.
Oh boy. Oh boy.
Oh boy. I am not plugged into anything anymore. Nothing is downloading. Nothing is downloading.
Is there something happening on my end?
I don't know.
Discord's open, but that's it.
Yeah, gotta,
My internet's great.
Yeah, everything's fine. Whatever. This is not interesting to talk about. What is interesting to talk about is David G. Hartwell's The Dark Descent. A book of ghosty
Fabulous Formless Darkness. Spooky
nonsense.
spooks.
Spooky dookie.
We're covering... There's so much crap on my desk. We're covering...
Keep it up, keep it up.
That's Nightside. We are covering... Jesus Christ, why
Yeah.
is Nightside so long? Walter de la Mare's Seaton's Aunt.
Seaton's aunt. Or aunt, as we sometimes say.
I only ever say aunt.
Seaton's aunt. A plucky little story that is cited by many. I think I compared it to The Changeling
Yeah.
because it is cited by many famous people as being one of the most terrifying works of short fiction ever committed to paper. So scary that they read it every year and they can never sleep at night. And then I read it and I was like, I mean, I've read it before. I read it years ago, like 10 years ago, when it was covered on another podcast. Pick it up, read it. And I'm like, I mean, it's a good story, but I don't understand why anybody thinks it's so scary they can't sleep at night. Like
Are we broken? Are we too, have we absorbed too much? I don't get it.
I don't think so. I don't think that I'm inured to all the tropes so much. This story is just strange, and it's more about a mood. And I guess if you're susceptible to mood, then sure. But what does Mr. David G. Hartwell have to say about Walter de la Mare?
I think I'm pretty susceptible to mood. I don't This story only confused me.
Okay, well, what does David G. Hartwell have to say?
Well, he says that this man who wrote this story is the master of dreadful uncertainty. His finest tales most often suggest the supernatural without confirming it.
All right.
And I mean, Seaton's aunt is an example of the 20th century development of the fantastic as the third major mode of horror. His purpose was to awaken his readers to the life of imagination. Horror was often his primary tool.
All right. So Walter de la Mare was born in 1873. He died in 1956 at the age of 83. He's a British writer, and he was known for three things mainly. Children's lit, supernatural fiction, and poetry. And he was like celebrated for all three throughout his life and beyond. But it makes for like some interesting reading because you'll find biographies of him written on like poetry websites, on children's lit websites, and then on horror websites. But he ended up influencing a lot of writers. Robert Aickman, Ramsey Campbell, Richard Adams all consider him a great influence. But some of his poetry was set to music by Benjamin Britten. People refer back to his works a lot. And I couldn't find much online about really what kind of a person he was. He just seemed to be a pretty solid writer who died of a coronary thrombosis in 1956, and he's buried in St. Paul's Cathedral. And he left behind a pretty comprehensive body of work, tons of books, novels, collections. He edited a bunch of collections of supernatural fiction and poetry and children's poetry. So just sort of an all-around jack-of-all-trades writer, and Seaton's Aunt is one of those stories that just gets anthologized a lot, and people seem to be terrified of.
Our main character's name is Withers.
Mm-hmm.
Which is, I think, the name of the spooky skeleton in Baldur's Gate 3.
What's funny about this story, so Seaton's Aunt, first published in 1922, is first published in, the London Mercury in 1922, and then it was like published in the Best British Short Stories like that same year, and then in the Riddle and Other Stories, a collection of Walter de la Mare stories. And I mean, it's been reprinted and reprinted and reprinted. So what's funny about Seaton's Aunt is that you could say the entire plot could be summed up by saying it's just three very uncomfortable conversations. It's just, that's it. Like, really what happens is it's three very uncomfortable visits to a guy's house is basically what happens.
Yeah.
Not if you take it all at face value, just sort of like what happens. Our narrator goes to this guy's house 3 times, and then he feels bad about it. And then that's it. Like, there may not be anything supernatural in this at all. Seaton's aunt herself, the aunt, is just a sort of a jerk. And she plays the piano really well. Seaton, the young guy, is a picked on kid. And then he's a put upon adult. And then he dies. And our narrator is like, I was never really friends with this guy. The end. That's kind of the plot of Seaton's Aunt. Is that accurate?
Yeah. I mean, this is such a weird story.
Yeah.
There was a point. Where did I want to? There was a thing I wanted to point out. Oh, the first time. So I'm just gonna run basic run of what goes on.
Yeah.
Okay, so basically the story starts with Withers and Seaton. They're boys in school. For some reason, Withers promised Seaton that he'd go to his aunt's house for part of like a break, like a school break.
Yeah.
Seaton was like, great. And Withers was like, why did I do this again?
Right.
Because no one likes Seaton, apparently.
Yeah, he's just he's the picked on kid.
Yeah. But they go, and they have, like, some awkward, like, small talk in the garden. They look at tadpoles, which is kind of sick. And then he meets the aunt, who is rich, question mark? She certainly seems rich. She calls him Mr. Smithers, which is not his name.
Yeah, she screws up his name a lot.
Yeah, probably because she has zero respect for anybody. She insults Seaton, or Arthur, as she calls him a lot. And kind of like, it's like, what's that term?
I don't know.
Negging.
What is that term? Kind of, yeah.
Yeah.
Except
for with, like, yeah.
Yeah.
So she, like, yeah, it's bizarre. Because she talks about how, like, she talks to Withers about how, like, oh, you seem great, blah, 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 blah. Oh, you should tell me what my nephew's getting up to, because he's not very well liked, and blah, 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 blah. She's, like, putting this one kid down and lifting this other kid up, basically. They have a great dinner. And then she's like, I'll show you to your room. Here's your room.
Uh-huh.
My brother died in it. Have fun.
It's also a much nicer room than the one that Seaton is in.
Yeah, it's a real Harry Potter situation in here.
Yeah, it's also weird. The aunt, when she talks to Withers, our main character, she's not, I wouldn't say she's flirty, but she's kind of flirty. It's just a little bit. It's weird. She's not.
It's very.
I can't quite.
I don't think she's necessarily all together.
Okay, so
even at that moment,
the big thing about this story is that there's hints and suggestions throughout that there might be ghosts in this house that Seaton's aunt is privy to. Now, this isn't. It's simultaneously made not a big deal of, and also is kind of the crux of the entire story. They just don't talk about it a lot. Seaton sort of drops that on our narrator, and then our narrator kind of makes fun of him a little bit, and then they, like, spy on the aunt one night. They stay up and they sneak around to spy on her, but nothing really comes of it. But then you get the impression that she might be aware of what is happening to Seaton at all times because she's privy to, like, some sort of extra sensory observation, or she's in contact with some sort of spirits. Again, it's not explicit.
Do we ever get any proof that she's actually aware of what Seaton is doing at all times?
He thinks she is, and she seems to be.
It really kind of seems like early dementia.
It's hard to say.
Yeah, because it doesn't really seem like she's necessarily all there, ever. Like, sometimes she has moments of, like, clarity, but they always talk about how, like, oh, and suddenly she goes distant.
Yeah,
just kind of
but
goes away.
That's also described as, like, maybe she's communing with spirits at that time. Again, we don't get any proof of this. She's just odd, but she's not, like, funny odd. She's acerbic and biting and cutting, and she just gets right. She finds out what bugs you about yourself and just sort of picks at it. But she also plays the piano really well, we find out later.
Yeah. But anyways, they talk. He leaves and goes back home. After the whole ghost sneaky thing, he's like, hey, that was weird. Goodbye. Like, they go back to school, and then he doesn't talk to him again for years, apparently. Until he bumps into him.
They're not friends.
Yeah.
And he makes that abundantly clear. He's like...
They bump into each other by accident when Seaton's out getting an engagement ring for his fiancée. And Seaton's like, come to my house. And Withers is like, okay, I guess. And they go back to the house, and it's just as awkward as the first time. At least fiance seemed nice.
Yeah, she's a little mousy, but she seems nice. Seaton
Hmm.
wants to be around her a lot, and they seem to get along, and they go for walks, and the aunt's like, come here and sit in my room, and I'll play piano for you, as we stare at them out the window.
Yep, and
And
Withers
there's a
is
lot
like,
of, like,
okay, because
philosophical talk.
yeah, and Seaton flips out. Doesn't flip out, but he's like, dude, she is manipulating everything she's saying. She's manipulating you, and Withers is like, bro, 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 come on, what are you even talking about? And Seaton's like, you'll see what I'm talking about. Withers is like, okay, whatever you say, man.
And then time passes again.
Yeah, and he passes the shop that he met Seaton at the first time, or the second time, I guess, and it's like, oh yeah, that guy that I knew probably is married by now. Oh, how rude, I didn't send my congratulations. Guess I should go to his house.
Yeah, he's like, I never sent him a gift or anything. Also, he never invited me to the wedding, but I guess I'll go check in on him, see how he's doing.
Because there was that whole weird thing where he was going to be the best man too.
Yeah, he was supposed to be involved in this. Again, Seaton says several times, like, you're my only friend. You're the only friend I have.
Yeah.
And our narrator, Withers, is like, I'm not really this guy's friend.
At all.
Yeah.
So he goes to go, talk to the aunt, I guess, to be like, where's Arthur? And she's like, I've been evil this whole time, actually.
Now she seems kind of senile.
Yeah. Because she was already getting up there in age and stuff.
Yeah.
But, yeah, he goes, and he's like, oh, where's Arthur? And she's like, oh, he's there. And he's like, what? She's like, well, where's his fiance? Where's his wife? And she's like, oh, she's in Yorkshire.
Yeah.
And is Arthur there too? Were you friends with my nephew?
She also confuses him for Seaton at one point. She thinks he's Seaton, and then she figures out who he is, and she gets very angry at him.
Yeah.
Long story short, Seaton's dead.
Yeah. Dead and gone.
He died of something.
We don't know how.
And our hero feels bad about it. He feels bad about it. He's like, Seaton is now buried, but we kind of all buried him a long time ago. It's really more a story about like that bad feeling you get when you think back on kind of how crappy a person you were to some kid. And then that's it. You're like, it's really like the sort of that, but what if ghosts? What if it was a scary story? I'm going to be completely honest. I really like this story. I do like this story. But because I get it as a weird fiction. Nothing is explained. You just kind of feel bad the whole time. Like, this is not cool. And there's something weird going on, but I don't know what.
I think the aunt murdered Seaton. That's my theory.
Well, so Lovecraft cited this as one of his favorite stories. And he says that it contains an element of like, how did he put it? Like malicious vampirism or something. And some people have taken that literally and been like, I think Lovecraft's saying that he thinks this is a vampire story. But really, it's more, I think what he means is that she kind of has just drained all of Seaton's life force from him. And
yeah, I mean, to me it felt like a story about enmeshment.
How do you mean?
Like, it felt like the aunt and Seaton were very, they were very close. Not close, I don't know how to describe it really, but it felt like she had latched onto him. And she was so weirded out by him like having a fiance and like maybe moving on from him that she might have like it's just like it feels like she was projecting a lot of stuff onto this kid that she had with her, and she was already kind of losing her mind, and the thought of him leaving kind of like broke her.
Right. And Seaton thinks that she is surrounded by the ghosts of her victims, her previous victims, and that he's going to be a victim. He's also convinced that she wants to steal his money because he's going to come into an inheritance when he gets older. This is when he's a kid. And he's convinced that his aunt is keeping him around to inherit that, to steal that money from him. So there's also kind of that weird element. You mentioned that,
but then doesn't it come up that there wasn't ever actually any money?
He says later on, he's like, we were always just kind of broke. Like, we're just kind of broke. And he's lucky to have found this woman who doesn't care.
Yeah.
Or house poor.
House poor, yeah, that's what it is.
Their house, yeah, they seem like they have money. It's a nice house and everything, but it's run down. All the servants have been fired. The place is kind of dusty, and it just falls into more and more disrepair until the very end when it's just kind of falling apart. Yeah, and one of the analyses I read, a review of the story mentions that it seems like it's heading in the direction of almost Lovecraft's Thing on the Doorstep, where you find out that like Seaton's aunt is taking over the boy. Like maybe she's going to put her mind into his brain, but that doesn't happen. Like nothing like that happens. Which interestingly enough, however, does lead me into there was this TV series called Shades of Darkness, this British horror anthology series that did an episode based on Seaton's aunt called Seaton's Aunt. And
wow,
it's available.
Really?
Yeah, it's available on YouTube. Just to check it. Someone uploaded it to YouTube. And what's fascinating about it, it's really well done. Almost all the dialogue is like directly from the story. It begins in their second meeting. It has them running into each other as adults. And he invites Withers back to meet his fiance, and then the whole first part is told as flashbacks, sort of woven in with the second part to kind of see like how we got here. Interestingly enough, though, in the adaptation, which some have said, and some reviews have said, actually in some ways improves on De la Mare's ending, which I don't know if I agree with, but it certainly makes it more dramatic. He actually runs into Seaton the third time, and Seaton's like, my fiance left me. Will you please come stay at my house? I have something I need to talk to you about. They get there, and the aunt is dead in the adaptation. And he is terrified that she is now one of the ghosts in the house, and he needs Withers to help him figure it out. There's this whole thing with a painting of an eye that the aunt has that Seaton hates because he feels like his aunt uses it to watch him. And he's like, every time I take it down now, and in the morning it comes back on, it's all back on the wall. I need you to stay up all night with me and help me watch this painting. Well, what ends up happening is Seaton Withers falls asleep, and then he wakes up. He hears something. Seaton is actually putting the painting back on the wall. He's sleepwalking, and Seaton is convinced that his aunt is in his head now. And it ends though with the same narration where he's like, we buried Seaton long ago, and now he's like buried with her. And it actually, in a way, more dramatically plays into the concept of like this forgotten guy, this poor kid who we just all gave up on early on and never stood a chance. It's actually
like
a really
ties into my theory of enmeshment.
It works really well. I watched the episode and I was like, oh, I was wondering how they were going to handle this ending, and they put a little more action into it, and it helps that the actors are all really good. This would make like a really interesting play, I think, if you were gonna, because it's only like 4 characters at any given time. So you also get to see a scene where the school bullies try to force feed Seaton worms.
That sucks.
He
I
doesn't eat
hate
them
bullying
though.
scenes in movies and stuff. It just is
They're
upsetting to me.
but what happens is Withers breaks up the bullying,
Mm-hmm.
and that's what kind of gets Seaton on his side, or him on Seaton's side, or it makes Seaton like, oh, and we do it. There is a great scene though where he's like, "Don't forget, you're coming to my aunt's place this weekend," and he's like, "Oh, right, yeah, great, yeah, yeah." um, but yeah, this is one of those stories that gets written about a lot. It's not as obtuse, it's not as dense as a Henry James story, but it really is about what the narrator is saying more than
Mhm.
like the plot. It's weird. I mean, I guess it is a weird story.
I can see why this story comes after Nightside.
Yeah, yeah. Do you
Yeah,
think it has
it
anything to
it
do with the concept of Nightside?
it really it feels the way that our main character reacts to the ghosts and stuff feels very similar to Nightside.
Yeah.
The sort of like disdain and whatever for what the secondary main character is like saying and thinking, and then at the very end when he's like, just the endings feel really similar for some reason.
How does Nightside end?
It ends with him swimming on the mountain with his family and trying to like forget and close off the voices that he's hearing now.
Right, right. You can't swim on a mountain. You climb mountains. You swim in the sea. Unless it's an
But it
underwater
just
mountain.
it feels very similar.
Yeah, that's sort of like, well, we've got two POV characters who are
Mm-hmm.
kind of, is something weird going on, or is it all in the heads of the victims? Yeah, we have Seaton, who's a victim,
Yeah.
and then we have the friend of his, Perry, who is a victim.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of manipulation from the other side as well, like this sort of like, I think I'm being
Yeah.
haunted, and it's kind of driving me insane. Except Seaton doesn't really go nuts; he just kind of disappears. In a way, it
Mm-hmm.
reminds me a little bit of the Buffy the Vampire Slayer episode about the girl who disappears because she's invisible
Oh,
to
the
the rest of
invisible
the
girl?
school. Yeah,
And then she
it
stabs Cordelia in the face.
or so, yeah, but it reminds me kind of that because just in the sense that this kid was doomed to fade out
It
anyway, to just fade. Like, does he fade away because he's being preyed upon by his aunt, or does he fade away, or does he feel like he's being preyed upon by his aunt because he's just in the process of disappearing from the world anyway? Again,
Yeah.
not something that terrifies me, but something that does make me go, that's terribly sad.
Mm-hmm.
Also, I hope that he and
It
his
reminds
fiance
me.
got some good kisses in.
I hope so
I hope,
too. Where is the story that it
I hope
reminds
he
me
got. I
of?
hope he got some kisses because he deserved a few.
Yeah. What story was it?
I
I'm
do
sorry, I'm
love.
really distracted
I know.
now.
I love your attempt to engage in conversation while you're also trying to find something in that book. Meanwhile, I'm talking about the poor boy getting sweet kisses, and you're like,
Yep.
sweet kisses. Yes, yes, father. Yes,
Was
I
it
agree.
was it
I
My Dear
agree.
Emily? Or was it no, it was
Which one? I don't know what you're talking
it's the
about.
story about uh she like the woman who thought she was the reincarnation of someone after being like when she was horribly abused by her father. And then she
Yeah,
dies
was
at the
that My
end.
Sweet Emily?
That might have My Dear Emily, maybe 50.
I don't
My Dear
remember.
Emily.
I don't remember. The more you describe the plots of these stories, the more I realize how brilliantly thematically similar they all are. Just because I was like, oh wait, is that the one? Oh no, that's Shulkin the painter. I'm sitting here like, oh god, there's so many reverberations throughout time through these stories. It's almost as if
My Dear Emily's the lesbian vampires.
the
A
lesbian
Rose for
of
Emily?
course. A Rose for Emily is about the old woman who dies, and they
Right.
find the dead body of her former suitor in bed next to her, or in
It
the
was
bed,
after the
in the
yellow
bed where she was sleeping.
wallpaper, wasn't it?
After the yellow wallpaper,
Was it How Love Came to Professor Gildea?
maybe, could be. Is that the one with the parrot?
Ah, that might be it. I don't remember. I'm so upset now.
Is it the one with the stone baby
No, no.
within the walls of Tyre? Ladies and gentlemen, Willow and I are devoted analysts of horror. However, sometimes it's hard for us with the brains we have, the brains I genetically gave to my child.
3 days.
What?
It's 3 days because she dies 3 days before they think that they die 3 days before. That's what it is.
3 days. That's the one
3
where you
days by
watch the
Tanith Lee.
videotape, you get a call on the phone that says 3 days, and then a girl climbs out of a well and you die. That's the
No,
one.
it reminds me of 3 days. When like with the sort of relationship that's shared between Arthur and the aunt and whatever her name was and the abusive father.
You can't just stop talking. It's so unfair that you just stop talking and look down.
Well, sorry, because it's a very similar dynamic where there's this like poor like upset kid who is just constantly verbally abused by this older woman, and you think at the end or you think in the middle that like things are looking up for him, and then he dies. And it's just a very similar like story progression, and the vibes are very similar in my opinion.
Exactly. I totally agree. The vibes are very similar. Who wrote 3 days?
Tanith Lee.
Tanith Lee. That's right. Okay. Yep. Seems like forever ago, but it was just a few weeks back. 3 days. So, yeah, that's Seaton's Aunt by Walter de la Mare. Strange story. Strange little tale. Any final thoughts on it?
I like the changeling. Don't really see how it's scary.
Okay.
I just don't. I guess I didn't really get the vibes that the ghosts were real. I think they were all just in this poor guy's head because of all of the stuff he had to deal with. These two kids are incredibly well spoken. They are truly British boys. I think he is less well spoken as an adult, actually. Because he says ain't once as an adult, and I don't think he would ever have said that as a child.
But I think that's a British ain't, which is like, oh, ain't.
I have no idea.
That's all I have to say.
It's a weird story. It's well done. It's well written. I think it does what it's supposed to do. I just don't find it scary.
Well, maybe you'll find the next one scary. What is the next story, Willow, in a fabulous, formless darkness?
Clara Militic by Ivan Turgenev.
Ivan Turgenev, Russian writer,
Ivan Turgenev. You heard it
Russian
here.
playwright, author of the play A Month in the Country that I was in a production of in high school. We did a study of A Month in the Country. Strange play in that it wasn't allowed to be produced until after Anton Chekhov made like that kind of play popular, and then they produced it. Long story about A Month in the Country. Ivan Turgenev, a Russian.
This is another novella.
Yeah, a Russian supernatural thriller horror story. Never read it.
I'm excited. We've not had a lot of non-Western stories so far.
And we've got some long ones coming up. So
yeah, we do.
Get ready, everybody.
Yeah, we do.
Yeah, but some good ones. Repair of Reputations, one of my
Yeah.
favorite short stories. The Willows, one of my favorites. So get ready, ladies and germs. But first, Clara Milic by Ivan Turgenev. We'll be talking Russians. We'll be talking storytelling. We'll be talking the Moscow Art Theater. Next time on It's Del Toro.
It's Del Toro time.
I'm kidding. I would never just sneak up on you like that. Do you have any news you have any news for our listeners?
News?
Anything interesting
no.
happening? Nuh-uh.
No, not really. I don't have anything going on. Just vibing. I have a new game starting tonight.
Ooh.
In the Lancer system. Wrote a short story for that. For my character stuff, so that's fun. Been doing some writing, I guess.
Great.
That's the update on my life.
I'm still doing Deep in Bear Country, still coming out. Pizza Toast has started back up again. We just did our coverage of A Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes, the movie, and we will be diving into, get ready for some horror, ladies and gentlemen. If you're interested, tune into Pizza Toast as we will be covering the entirety, books and films and others, of the Twilight Saga. That's right. Vampires, ladies and gentlemen. Vampires. Here they come.
I feel bad for you.
Here they come.
I feel bad.
We're going to be discussing
I tried
it
to
as...
read those books when I was in the, age range for them, and I couldn't.
Listen, we're going to be discussing it as a pop cultural phenomenon. We're going to be discussing its influences, how it changed publishing, how it changed the way films are made, how it changed the careers of its stars. We're going to be taking a deep dive into all things Twilight, approaching it from a neutral perspective. A totally fair and neutral perspective. That's all I have to say.
If you want a totally unfair and unneutral perspective, just have me on as a guest.
If I wanted an unfair, unneutral perspective, I'd look at 99% of all commentary on it. But no, so that's on Pizza Toast. Tune in or drop dead. Otherwise,
don't do that.
Otherwise, thank you so much for joining us. Thank you so much for listening. I am Phil.
And I'm Willow.
And we'll see you when...
It's Del Toro.
It's Del Toro time.
Right.